Rachel Matthews had never planned to live in a place like this. The house at 79 Winslow Street stood at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, shaded by ancient elms and cloaked in a stillness that didn't quite feel peaceful. It had sat on the market for over 6 years, with realtors quietly shuffling it between listings, never able to explain why no buyer ever stayed long. It was a Victorian relic, beautiful in the kind of way that felt a little too intact, like a corpse perfectly preserved behind glass. For Rachel, it was a steal. After a messy divorce and months of spiraling in a New York apartment that still smelled like her ex-husband's cologne, Rachel wanted isolation. She wanted space to breathe, to write, to start over. And Vermont in the fall felt like a blank page. The house had creaky floors, water stains on the ceiling, and wallpaper that peeled in long, curling sheets. But it also had charm. Hand-carved moldings, a massive fireplace in the living room, a clawfoot tub. It felt like a house that had stories to tell. And as a struggling writer with a fascination for the eerie and unexplained, that was exactly what Rachel wanted. She moved in on a windy afternoon in late September. The air smelled like apples and dry leaves. The movers were gone by dusk, leaving her alone with a mountain of boxes and the persistent groaning of old wood settling. It wasn't until the third day that she discovered the attic. There was no visible door upstairs, no stairwell, no hatch in the ceiling. But while cleaning out the hallway closet, she noticed something odd. A narrow seam in the wall behind the coats, nearly invisible in the dim light. When she pressed on it, the panel gave way with a reluctant creak, revealing a steep wooden staircase that led into darkness. She hesitated. The air that wafted out was dry and cold, like something had been trapped in there for a long, long time. Grabbing a flashlight, Rachel climbed the stairs slowly. Dust swirled in the beam of light, and each step let out a sharp protest beneath her weight. The attic was larger than she expected. Long, low-ceilinged, with a single round window casting a pale circle of light on the floor. Cobwebs hung like curtains. Boxes were stacked along the walls, all sealed and unmarked. In the far corner sat a large armoire, its doors cracked open just slightly. Rachel approached it, brushing away a sheet of gauzy webbing. The air felt colder here, as if the attic held its breath. When she opened the doors fully, she froze. Inside was a collection of dolls, not toy store plastic or mass-produced porcelain. These were handmade, cloth and ceramic and wood, meticulously detailed. Some wore miniature glasses, others had freckles, chipped teeth, tiny necklaces. Each one looked individualized, as if they were modeled after real people. There were at least a dozen, all seated neatly on small wooden shelves, staring straight ahead. She studied one, a girl with short black curls and a blue jumper. There was something strange about her eyes, not just the usual painted glassy stare, but a look of awareness, of attention, like it was watching her. Rachel shivered. She didn't touch any of them, just closed the doors, backed away slowly, and went back downstairs. That night, she dreamed of footsteps overhead, rhythmic, slow, like a child pacing in circles above her bed. When she woke the next morning, she found a single dusty handprint on the hallway mirror. Small, like it belonged to a child. But Rachel lived alone. Rachel tried to forget the attic. She told herself the handprint on the mirror was just old. Residue. Maybe the movers had touched it without thinking. Maybe her mind was playing tricks after the stress of the move. It had been a hard year. People imagined things, but she still couldn't stop thinking about that one doll. The girl in the blue, jumper with the short curls and glassy, almost knowing eyes. 3 nights later, the footsteps returned. This time they came at 2:13 a.m., sharp. Rachel checked the clock. She was already awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for something she hadn't dared admit she was expecting. The steps were heavier now, deliberate, like whatever was walking up there knew she was listening. She grabbed her flashlight and went upstairs. The closet door was still open, the attic panels still ajar. She stood at the base of the stairs, heart pounding, light trembling in her grip. "Hello?" she called out. Silence. She climbed one step, then another. By the time she reached the top, the cold was back. Sharper now, unwelcoming. The armoire was still in the corner, but its doors were wide open. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. All the dolls were still there, all except one. The girl in the blue jumper was missing. Panic bloomed in her chest. She turned in a slow circle, scanning the room with her flashlight. Then she saw it. The doll was sitting in the middle of the attic floor. It hadn't fallen. It hadn't been dropped. It was placed, precisely, legs folded, hands on its lap, head tilted slightly toward her, as if it were waiting. Rachel backed away. She shut the attic panel and stuffed a chair under the doorknob for good measure. Then she locked herself in her bedroom and didn't sleep a single minute. The next morning, she made calls, first the realtor, then the Historical Society. No one had any useful information. The house had passed through multiple owners over the decades, most with short stays. One family lived there for 10 years in the 60s, another for less than a year. In the early 2000s, one man inherited it from a relative and moved out after 2 months. No deaths on record, no major crimes, just a pattern of people leaving. She tried asking about the attic. No one knew anything. Most listings hadn't even mentioned it. Rachel decided to investigate the boxes she'd ignored the first time. She returned to the attic just before sunset, determined not to be afraid. She brought gloves, a notebook, and her phone's camera. The armoire was closed again. The doll was back on the shelf. Her hands trembled as she passed it. The first box she opened was full of old newspapers, yellowed and brittle. The second had a stack of faded Polaroids. They were photos of people, some smiling, some not, all of them standing in different rooms of the house, the kitchen, the living room, the upstairs hallway, and all of them had a doll with them, a doll that matched them exactly. Rachel's heart pounded faster. She found a picture of a red-haired man holding a wooden doll with a red yarn wig and matching flannel shirt. Another showed an elderly woman with thick glasses standing next to, a tiny replica of herself, down to the brooch on her collar. The last photo in the stack nearly made Rachel drop it. It was a black and white photo. A young girl with curly black hair, wearing a blue jumper, standing in the attic, and next to her was the very same doll Rachel had found, the one now sitting back on the armoire shelf. On the back of the photo, scrawled in faded ink, were 3 words: "She never left." That night, Rachel dreamed of whispering voices. She couldn't understand the words, but they sounded like children, repeating something over and over, laughing, chanting. When she woke, the attic door was open again. The chair had been pushed aside, and on her bedroom floor sat the blue jumper doll. Its head was turned, looking directly at her. Rachel stared at the doll on her floor. Its tiny porcelain hands rested gently on its lap. Its head was tilted just slightly to the side, as if it were curious, watching. She couldn't move at first, Then slowly, she grabbed a towel from the bathroom, wrapped it around the doll without touching its skin, and shoved it in the back of her bedroom closet. She slammed the door shut and leaned against it, shaking. "I'm not imagining this," she whispered aloud, as if saying it would make it real. "This is happening." That morning, Rachel didn't go to work. She didn't eat. She scoured the internet for anything: urban legends, hauntings, strange objects, the name of the house's former residents, the girl in the photo. After hours of digging, she found something: a missing persons report from 1978 named Emily Harrow, age 10, disappearance. Location 133 Elmwood Drive, last seen playing in the attic. Rachel's stomach dropped. Emily's photo was the same one from the Polaroid, same curls, same jumper. The report said the police found no sign of forced entry, no blood, no struggle. It was like the girl had simply vanished. But the most chilling part was this: the family reported hearing voices in the walls in the days leading up to Emily's disappearance. Rachel looked around her bedroom, then slowly she pressed her ear to the wall. Silence. Then a whisper, so faint she thought it might be in her head, but then came another, and another. Soft, childlike murmurs, as though a group of children were speaking or chanting. Her breath caught in her throat. That night, Rachel did not sleep in her bedroom. She stayed on the living room couch with all the lights on, clutching her phone, half expecting the doll to come crawling down the stairs. But nothing came. The next day, Rachel called a local paranormal investigator. It felt ridiculous, but she didn't care anymore. She needed answers. The investigator, a quiet man in his 60s named Marcus, showed up with equipment and an assistant. Rachel showed him the attic, the dolls, the photographs. She even showed him Emily's picture. Marcus frowned. "I've seen this before," he said. "Objects retaining impressions, emotions. Sometimes, if enough grief or trauma is focused on one place, it doesn't just go away, it lingers." He pulled out an EMF meter and began scanning the attic. Almost instantly it spiked near the armoire, then again near the boxes of dolls. Finally he turned to Rachel.
"Have you heard anything strange?" She hesitated. "Voices in the walls, footsteps, and that doll." She opened the closet. The towel was untouched, but the doll was gone. Marcus looked grim. "This isn't a normal haunting. It's attached to something. Someone. That little girl didn't just disappear. Something took her." His assistant piped up, pale-faced. "Or she never left." That night, Rachel and Marcus agreed to do an overnight investigation in the house. They set up motion sensors, cameras, EVP recorders in every room, especially the attic. Rachel slept in the living room again. Marcus stayed upstairs with a monitor. At 3:17 a.m., every motion sensor in the attic triggered at once. Rachel woke to a loud crash upstairs. She and Marcus rushed to the attic. The armoire was tipped over. The dolls were strewn across the floor, but one had been placed carefully in the middle of the room again. Not the girl in the jumper this time. A new one, a doll that looked exactly like Rachel. Same brown hair, same clothes from earlier that day. "Same freckle under the eye." Rachel screamed. Marcus stared in silence, then turned to the monitor. The footage showed nothing until one frame, just before the crash, glitched. For a split second, in the corner of the attic was a shadowy figure, child-sized. Rachel
barely slept after the incident in the attic. The image of her likeness in porcelain haunted her thoughts. The same freckles, same sweater, even the same tiny tear in the knee of her jeans. Someone, or something, was watching her with disturbing accuracy. Marcus took the doll for further analysis, promising to call as soon as he had anything. Rachel, meanwhile, couldn't bear to be alone in the house, but something pulled her back to the attic again, a compulsion, as if it wanted her to return. She went up in daylight, this time armed with gloves and a flashlight. The attic smelled of dust and something faintly sweet, rotting wood maybe, or something worse. She crouched beside the overturned armoire and noticed a section of wall behind it, oddly smooth, no seams, just blank wood paneling. But then she saw it, a small seam, barely visible, a hidden door. Rachel's heart pounded. She pried it open slowly, revealing a narrow crawl space. The flashlight's beam revealed claw marks inside, dozens of them, fingernail scratches in the wood, desperate and deep. And at the back of the crawl space, a ragged stuffed bear lay in the dust. Its button eyes were gone, its fabric torn. Rachel reached for it, then froze. A voice. He said I couldn't leave, a
child's voice, right beside her ear. But no one was there. She stumbled backward, barely catching herself, before falling down the attic ladder. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Marcus called. I analysed the doll. There's something. Inside, Rachel sat up, adrenaline surging. Inside? It's not just porcelain. There's fabric in the core. Organic material. I think there's hair, human hair. This isn't just a doll, it's a container. It's chill.
felt like vomiting. A container for what? A soul, Marcus said simply. Rachel's resolve hardened. She needed to know what happened in this house, what happened to Emily, why the dolls were here, and why she had become one of them. So she returned to the attic again, this time with a hammer. She began tearing at the wall behind the armoire. It took over an hour, but eventually she broke through into a narrow passage behind the crawl space. A hidden chamber. The air was stale and bitter, like decay, sealed in for decades. The room was small, barely big enough to lie down in, and the walls were covered in old drawing, crayon scribbles, stick figures, a sun, a child's handwriting. He watches me from the mirror. Don't sleep. He comes when you sleep. And then one sentence, written over and over again in red crayon, covering an entire wall. I want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go home. Rachel backed out slowly, the flashlight shaking in her hand. That night, Marcus returned. Need to perform a cleansing, he said. Something is trapping the spirits here. The dolls are more than echoes, they're vessels.
And your arrival has stirred things. Rachel nodded. I think I know where it all started, she said. There's a room behind the attic. They began the ritual at midnight. Candles lit, salt lines drawn. Marcus read aloud from a book.
Rachel didn't recognize in a language she didn't understand. The house groaned with each word. In the attic, the air turned ice cold, and then the dolls began to move. Not walk, not shift, but vibrate ever so slightly. Their heads tilted, their eyes blinked. Rachel backed into Marcus. What's happening? They're reacting. Whatever's holding them, it knows we're trying to break it. Then a sound from the crawl space. Knock, knock, knock. Marcus shouted louder, voice cracking until silence. Then screaming. Not from Rachel, not from Marcus, but from within the walls. High-pitched, childlike, dozens of voices crying at once. The candles burst. The room plunged into darkness. Rachel turned and saw it in the doorway of the attic. A figure, tall, thin, eyes hollow and black like the space between stars, its limbs too long, its skin the color of ash, its mouth too wide, grinning, and in its hand, a doll. Her doll. Rachel couldn't scream. The entity moved without sound, gliding across the attic floor until it stood inches from her. Then it whispered, "You took her place." Rachel's breath caught in her throat. The figure, the tall, grinning thing, stood just inches away. The doll in its hand was identical to the one Marcus had taken. Rachel's likeness now returned, as if it had never left. Behind her, Marcus chanted desperately, voice hoarse and broken. The entity didn't blink. "Didn't breathe? Then you took her place," it repeated, slowly lifting the doll, and crushed it. The porcelain cracked like bone. Tiny shards scattered across the attic floor. Rachel screamed, an internal scream, as a burning sensation ripped through her chest. For a second she thought her heart had stopped. Then silence. The entity stepped back into the shadows. It faded, not vanished, but slid into the crawl space wall like mist drawn into a crack. The darkness swallowed it. Rachel collapsed. Marcus rushed to her, his hands trembling. "You okay? Rachel!" She could barely nod. He helped her up, around. Then the attic was still. The dolls, frozen again, lifeless, cold, and something else was different. The doll that resembled her was now gone, entirely. Where it once sat, a small wooden plaque remained. Rachel leaned closer. "Emily." The next day, police and forensic teams arrived after Marcus made the anonymous call. The crawl space and hidden chamber were excavated. Inside, they found 6 small skeletons, children, each buried beneath loose floorboards, each one clutching something, a stuffed bear, a toy truck, a crayon, and beside each skeleton was a porcelain doll. The last body, in the deepest section, was smaller than the others. Likely the youngest. Dental records later confirmed what Rachel had already guessed. Emily Parker. Age 8, reported missing in 1991. Last seen entering the house with her new stepfather. The case had gone cold decades ago. Until now, Rachel never returned to the house. Marcus stayed behind to oversee the rituals of cleansing, a process that took weeks. He told her the entity was likely an egregore, a being formed from trauma, grief, and collective energy. It had latched on to Emily's pain, her fear, her loneliness, and it fed. Fed on every child who came after, their souls trapped in porcelain, preserved, silenced, until Rachel broke the cycle. By hearing them, by believing them. Months passed. Rachel moved to the city, got a small apartment, tried to rebuild, but one night, just after midnight, she received a package. No return address. Inside, a small wooden box, and in it, a doll. Not hers, not Emily's. Someone new. Male, teenage, maybe, and a name carved into the base. Ethan. She stared at it for hours. The attic was gone, the house was sold, but something told her it had only just begun.